Thank you for joining me. My name is Victoria Jamian. I'm the Director of Basic Needs Services, and this is our Let's Get Financially Fit program as a part of our financial literacy series. In today's program, here are a few learning outcomes that we'll cover in today's conversation. So it'll be an understanding of financial wellness, how financial well-being impacts overall wellness, and understanding the 5 aspects of that influence financial wellness, and a discussion on how budgeting and financial goal setting can contribute to financial wellness as well. So when we talk about wellness, I think more often than not, many people think of emotional wellness or maybe physical wellness, but there are actually many different dimensions that contribute to our overall wellness. And you can see all 8 on the screen. And then also within the more inner circle of the wellness wheel, you can also see that some of these are interconnected. So one area of wellness could very much impact another, whether you realize it or not. Financial well-being is a part of that wellness wheel, I'm sure you saw. And here's a definition that I think is a really good encompassment of what financial wellness and well-being can look like. So this definition is financial well-being can be defined as a state of being wherein a person can fully meet current and ongoing obligations, can feel secure in their financial future, and is able to make choices that allow enjoyment of life. And this is from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau back in 2015. And I like this definition because it talks about current ongoing financial obligations, so your day-to-day expenses, your monthly expenses, but you also feel secure in your financial future, whether that could be an emergency fund or just being confident in what's coming forward. But you're also able to do things in your day-to-day and make that financial choice that allow you to enjoy the things. So whether that's going out with friends for dinner or getting, a daily cup of coffee, you have that financial freedom to do so. So to break down this definition a little bit more, I think simplify, we can think about financial well-being as your present and future, and then also security and freedom of choice. So present security would look like just control over your day-to-day, month-to-month finances. You understand what your expenditures are, you know what your income is, and you have a very good understanding, again, of those day-to-day, month-to-month expenses. Present freedom of choice is, since you do have that understanding, you have the financial freedom to make choices in your day-to-day life that cause joy. So again, this could be going out with friends for dinner. This could be getting a daily cup of coffee. You know you have that financial ability because you have a good understanding of your day-to-day expenses. Future security is really the capacity to absorb financial shock. So having an emergency fund, having savings, in case something unexpected comes up, you have that padding, if you will, to be able to absorb any of those financial stressors just in case. And then future freedom of choice. This is your being on track to meet any of your financial goals. So this could be having an emergency fund. This could be being able to pay off student loans after a certain timeline after graduation, or being able to afford a new car, whatever your own personal financial goals are. So why does financial wellness matter? It impacts other areas of wellness. So as you saw earlier, some of those different dimensions impact other dimensions. So very much if you are not as financially well as you could be, this could impact your emotional wellness. It could lead to depression, anxiety. It could mean in terms of impacting your occupational wellness. Maybe you are having to take a job that maybe is not fulfilling, or one that you don't particularly care for, but you need that income to pay for your expenses. It could impact your environmental wellness, and that maybe you're having to make choices of where you can live based on what you can afford. Physical wellness, there are ways that financial stress can manifest in physical being. And then social wellness. Maybe this is something where you don't have the financial freedom to make those decisions to go out with friends. And so you're having to not be as engaged with your social network as you'd like because of that financial impact. So financial stress is not something that's a unique experience. On a survey of over 2,000 Americans between the ages of 18 and 34, about 75% over the age of 18 said they experienced financial stress. And specifically, almost 74% of students said they were stressed about personal finances. 45% shared that they most likely would not be able to provide $400 for a financial emergency. And about 71% of students lost some or all of their sources of income during the pandemic. So yes, stress can look in different ways. And yes, we are coming out of the pandemic, but there are still some lingering effects. So when it comes to financial stress, this is something that is not a unique experience. It impacts a lot of students. I mentioned earlier that financial well-being can impact other areas. So I mentioned physical and emotional well-being. So how can that manifest itself physically? It could look like high blood pressure, muscle tension, poor digestion. It could mean that you don't have the financial means to take care of your physical wellness, meaning you can't afford to do a doctor's visit because of the copays or the concerns of potential medical bills. You could be experiencing depression or anxiety, or maybe even feeling shame that you are having these financial stressors. So like I said, this financial wellness aspect can impact very many different dimensions of overall well-being. So what impacts our financial wellness? I think a lot of us think it's just spending and saving, but it's a little bit more than that. There are 5 different factors that influence financial wellness. So financial behaviors, economic factors, psychological factors, social factors, and finally knowledge and experience factors. And we'll talk a little bit about each one of these. So financial behaviors, these are very much behaviors that you can control. So you can make a lot of decision making to improve your financial wellness based on your financial behaviors. So first, what does your planning look like? Have you set realistic goals? Are you budgeting to meet those goals? What does your planning look like? What does your money management look like? Are you tracking expenses? Do you understand your cash flow and controlling that? So understanding what your income is being used towards in terms of your expenses, maybe day-to-day expenditures that you have. And do you know what the difference are for yourself of what are your wants and your needs? So have you categorized that to have a better understanding of what is a want and what is a need? Decision making, are you making informed financial decisions? Are you reaching out to trusted friends and family for support, maybe financial institutions, just to have better information about what decisions might be best for you? Are you doing that research? And then the follow through. Are you using your knowledge and experience to follow through on your plans? Are you adjusting when necessary? Sometimes things are a bit of a trial and error, or things are happening that might cause you to adjust. So for example, if there's a sudden rise in gas prices, that might mean an adjustment in your budget or changing your financial behaviors to adjust for that sudden change. Economic factors. So unlike financial behaviors, economic factors you have some control over, but not as to the same extent. And some of these may also take time to see the impact. So you see income, expenses, education, and location. So income, do you have any changes to your income? Do you know your debt to income ratio? What's your employment status? So part of this, yes, you have a little bit of control, whether or not you're employed, you can be job searching, you can be working very diligently to gain employment, but there might be a sudden change in your income. Maybe you had to have unexpected reduced hours. That's outside of your control. But debt to income ratio is something you very much can control and understand. So debt to income ratio is how much income do you have comparatively to your monthly debts. And with your debt to income ratio, you want to have more income than to debt. So this might be something where you can look at your expenses and say, I need to make some changes. So with expenses, what changes can you make? Can you reduce some of your unnecessary expenses or some fixed? Maybe can you reduce some, like maybe grocery budgets or eating out budgets? And then do you also have savings or a buffer for any unexpected emergency expenses? Those can very much change month to month. You may not have those for a long period of time, but maybe something comes up and are you able to absorb that cost? Education, so a university degree or being a tradesperson. I think we all are here at the university to get a degree into a field that we want to work in and hopefully being compensated appropriately for that. But that takes time for that to occur. As you all know, you have to complete your courses, you have to get that degree before you can get into that field and hopefully with that corresponding paycheck. A tradesperson, so someone who's maybe a plumber or a mason, doesn't have as much education, meaning they don't have to go through a 4-year university degree. Maybe they can do an associate's degree or different types of education. And so maybe they're able to start going into their field much faster and seeing those payoffs a little bit quicker. They do sometimes have apprenticeships. So again, there could be some delays in getting to being at the top of their field because of that apprenticeship. but it may be a little bit more of a faster process than going through a university degree. And then finally, location. So cost of living and climate impacts. So as you all know, Southern California is not the most affordable place to live, but maybe you're thinking about post-graduation moving to a more affordable place where the cost of living isn't so high. But sometimes we need to think about what may be some climate impacts. So for example, places like Florida or in the Gulf, they have a lot of hurricanes and a lot of weather issues that might result in a lot of unexpected expenses, or maybe even higher elements of your monthly budget just based on that climate. Psychological factors. So this really boils down to how confident are you in your financial management and your understanding. So with financial confidence, are you aware of your finances? Do you feel like you have a good handle on that? Does money not scare you? Like, kind of where do you fall in just feeling confident in managing money and your finances? Age, how much does this impact you? How much experience do you have? Maybe you've been thinking about finances since you were younger, or you've been employed for a long time, so you have just a lot more understanding and feel more confident just based on your experience that you bring. When it comes to impulsivity, are you able to stick to a plan or lists, goals, or do you do things impulsively? So for example, when you go to the grocery store, do you just toss things into your cart, or are you able to really stick to that list when you're going through the store? And then finally, social status. So socioeconomic background can impact, your awareness of financial matters or how you feel regarding that. Same thing with your current status. You're potentially a college student, whether you're at your first year or second year, close to graduation. Maybe you're a potential graduate student, and that's something you're also considering as well. And so there are some preconceived notions of what college students should be doing, that kind of hustling college student, and that could have some factors onto how you're viewing your money management. Social factors. So kind of how does the world around us inform our feelings towards money management and financial wellness? So do you have family and social supports? Do you have a relationship status that might impact that? So meaning couples that live together usually have reduced costs because they're sharing those bills, but maybe you have roommates that help with that as well. Has your family discussed financial management? Is that a conversation you've had with your family or maybe trusted friends? How familiar are you with just different experiences from those around you that may be able to support you or give you more information? And then finally, what is your understanding of financial systems? Do you understand how banks work? Do you understand how credit cards work? Do you know the difference between a bank like Bank of America or maybe a credit union like Schools First? So just having an understanding of financial systems can also help with just your overall understanding of financial wellness. And then finally, knowledge and experience factors. So financial literacy has an action component, which is the ability or skills to put financial knowledge to use. So are you able to seek reliable information? Do you know where to get that reliable information? Again, trusted family, friends, maybe going to financial institutions. Do you know where to get the information? And once you get that information, how are you processing it? Do you understand it? Are you able to apply it to your own experiences, your own situation? And once you do so, are you adjusting? Are you learning to execute financial decisions, being able to monitor your expenses, adapt to stay on track to whatever your financial goals may be? And are you also able to use previous experience as a guide? Sometimes as we're going through understanding our financial wellness, there might be some trial and error. So for example, with a budget, maybe you thought one process would work. Maybe not so much, let's try another one. So are you using your own kind of experience to help guide you in moving forward with your financial wellness? So what can you do? Where can you go from here? And it's really practicing. So financial wellness is like any other aspect of wellness. It takes time to understand, and changes don't happen overnight. So for example, when you are working out, you have to be consistent. You have to put in the work towards it, and change doesn't happen overnight. It's something that takes time to fully see the results that maybe you're looking for, whatever they may be. If you're not sure where to start improving your financial wellness, a budget is a great tool and it's a great starting point. And even if you're a little bit more familiar, a budget is a great way of always coming back to a baseline and making sure you have that control over your day-to-day finances. So I think a lot of us sometimes have negative connotations when it comes to budgets, but I do like this definition from Dave Ramsey, which is a budget isn't about restricting what you can spend. It gives you permission to spend without guilt or regret. So when you have a good budget, you understand what your expenses are, where your responsibilities are in terms of your expenditures, what expenses you have to make sure you meet, and what funds are available for you to, again, do things that give you joy or have that financial freedom to make those choices in your day-to-day. So how does budgeting improve our financial wellness? Like I mentioned, it provides control over your finances. It allows you a better chance of reaching your savings and financial goals. It gives you a pretty good measurement of your financial health. I mentioned a little bit earlier that debt to income ratio. So when you really have a good budget and you're tracking, you really understand what your debts are comparatively to the income that you're bringing in. It also lets you map your financial priorities. So if you've never tracked your expenses before, this will give you a good idea of where your money is going. What is a financial priority to you? So for example, if you've never tracked and you're like, oh, I didn't realize I was eating out so much, or I was getting so much coffee out, you can use that information to readjust and remap out your financial priorities to maybe I'm going to do more of a grocery budget. I'm going to do meal prep, so I'm not eating out quite as much. Budget also helps ensure that you have the financial resources to do what you need and what you want to do, or to have in case of emergency. So making sure you have enough to pay for your rent, utilities, but also, I want to make sure I can go out to eat maybe once or twice a month with my friends and, just enjoy that. Or, I'm using my budget to make sure that I have a small savings account or an emergency fund just in case something should happen. So it gives that improved peace of mind because you understand where your financial situation is. So what are the four main elements of budgeting? So you have income, expenses, savings, and financial goals. So what does your income look like? Is this your financial aid disbursement? Do you have pay from a traditional position? So maybe that's an on-campus job, an off-campus job where you're getting a weekly, monthly paycheck. Are you receiving family support, whether that's indirect or direct? So direct family support would be maybe your family saying, I'm going to provide X amount of dollars per month to help with your rent. Whereas indirect may be, we're going to help you with your phone bill. We'll pay that for you. So you don't have to worry about that expense, but they're not giving you funds specifically for that bill. So that's why it's indirect in that case. Do you know what your expenses are? So there are two different categories, fixed and variable. Fixed are your high priority, consistent payment costs and deadlines. This is something like your rent, maybe your car insurance, your car payments. Every month on this date, it's going to be this amount and that you have to pay it by this time. So these do not change on a monthly basis. Variable expenses, the importance shifts, costs may differ on a month-to-month basis, and the deadlines may change. So it could be one of these many things. So for example, utility bills, gas prices, or your electric bill may impact how high that bill is for that month. Also your usage, maybe if you're not at home quite as often, or you're not running the AC or running the heat, that cost will lower a little bit. Same thing with a grocery budget. Still important, but you may be eating out more, or maybe you've done more meal prep. So that could shift that budget, how much you're spending per month within that. Savings, do you have an emergency fund? Are you putting away for that? If you are already thinking kind of more long-term, have you started thinking about something as far out as maybe retirement or maybe something post-graduation? And your financial goals. So what are your overall goals that you want to achieve? Are they short-term? Are they long-term? Is it a combination of both? So for example, a short-term goal could be, I want to start establishing a budget so I understand my day-to-day expenses. And I'd like to start saving for a emergency fund. And maybe a long-term goal is, I like to be able to start saving so that when I graduate, I'd like to be able to purchase a new car, or I want to be able to pay off my student loans by X date. If you are not sure where to start, using SMART goals can help make your budgeting a little bit easier. So what are SMART goals? So they are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So there are some questions that you see of like how to help you identify if your goal is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, or time bound. So for example, maybe your goal is to have a $400 emergency savings fund. So what do I want to accomplish? Is it specific? Yes, $400 emergency fund. Is that measurable? Yes, it's $400. You'll know like once you meet that mark that you've achieved that. Is that realistic? I think that depends on what parameters you set for that. So if your goal is I want to have $400 by the end of this year, so the December of 2023, how can you make that a realistic goal? Is that breaking it down on a monthly payment to your savings account? How would you achieve that? Is it relevant? How is this relevant to you? Yes, I'd like to have this emergency fund just in case something should happen. And time bound. What can you do now? What can you do 6 days from now? What can you do 6 months from now? So, you know, can you start with the budget? Can you start increasing those savings on a monthly basis? So what are some ways that you can meet that? I want to have $400 in emergency fund by the end of the calendar year. How can you start making those changes to see those that tracking towards that goal? So a few budgeting tips. Be purposeful, have a purpose or a defined goal. What are you looking for? What is the point of the budget that you're creating? What's the time frame? Are you doing a quarterly budget, monthly, bi-weekly, weekly, combination? Be flexible. Budgets can change from month to month. They may require some adjustments. They may be revised, but be flexible with that. There are many different mitigating factors. So for example, maybe 1 month your gas bill is much higher just because of the expenses, but you're able to make some adjustments and it's lower. And keep it simple. The more complicated the budget, the more difficult it is to keep up with. So simplify your budgets, find something that you can keep up with and that you'll be able to do for the long term, because you can make as many budgets as you like, but if it's too complicated, you're not going to keep up with it, then it's not really helping you in the long run. So when it comes to budgeting, there's no right or wrong method. There are a lot of different ways, but find a method that you're comfortable with and again, that you can maintain use of. So I think the very basic one is just paper tracking, writing down your expenses, writing down your income, just writing it all out to see what is your debt to income ratio and where you can make some adjustments. You can use budgeting apps. So there's things like Minted or You Need a Budget. Some are free, some you need to pay for, and some actually tie into your bank account. So you can set those through the app, and then the app will just track and give you alerts as you're going through your month. There's something called the envelope or a cash method. So you can see on the screen, there's some envelopes and they have different categories listed on them. So in this particular method, you are getting your income in cash and divvying it up in these different envelopes based on what your budget is. So you would put an envelope for rent, and that would be the money in that envelope would be for your rent. One for food, so this would be your grocery budget, so on and so forth. And the idea is as you go through the month, you pay for those expenses out of that particular envelope that corresponds. And the idea is once you've exhausted that envelope, you're done for the month. You're not really supposed to go into other envelopes to pull funds. It's based on what those pre-set budgets are. If you like this method, but don't necessarily want to deal with cash, there are virtual versions of this, but with the same premise. And then finally, if you like more of like a percentage view, there's the 50-30-20 method, for example, where 50% of your income goes to your needs. So rent, transportation costs, utilities, groceries, 30% goes to your wants. So going out for takeout, going to have like fun times with friends, whether that's movies, concerts, etc. And then 20% goes to your financial future. So whether that's building up your savings, an emergency fund, maybe even paying down debt, if that's something that you want to prioritize. So as you're going through your budget, you want to find balance. So ideally, we always want to be in the positive where you have more income than expenses. And when that happens, you can start increasing your investments, whether that's in your savings, your emergency funds, or maybe towards a financial goal. So for example, if you want to be able to purchase a new car or working towards paying off any student loans you may have, you can always consider paying more towards debt as well to help continue to reduce that debt to income ratio. If you do find yourself in the negative, that means you have more expenses than income. And what you should do is start to monitor your expenses and adjust accordingly. Can you find ways to increase your income or maybe reduce your expenditures? So maybe reducing your spending habits, or maybe finding ways to reduce those expenses. So for example, are there student discounts? Can you reduce your streaming services? Just as some quick examples. I mentioned this earlier, but just remember, be flexible. Finding yourself in the negative can be really stressful. So if you need to start adjusting your budgets, how can you be flexible? Review your expenses. Can you minimize your non-essential expenses first? So if you notice like, hey, I have all these streaming services, I actually only use 2. Can you cancel those subscriptions? Can you save on food expenses? Can you meal plan? So meal prep your week. So when you're going to the store, you have a very set grocery list, you know what you need, and you're not just tossing things into your cart based on what looks good in the store. Can you adjust your savings? So maybe in your original budget you had, I'm going to save $50 a month towards my emergency fund. And as you're going through, maybe that's just not helpful at this time. Maybe you need to lower that to maybe $10 a month, or maybe you need to pause it until you're able to get your balance into that positive. And then are there any assistance programs that might be helpful? So for example, there's CalFresh, which is a nutrition assistance program that helps individuals and households purchase fresh groceries. Students that are potentially eligible and approved get a monthly benefit on an EBT card, works like a debit card that you can use towards your groceries. So what that means is if you have CalFresh benefits, those funds are going towards other areas of your budget because the CalFresh benefits are paying for your groceries. So just remember, adjust your variable expenses first, because your fixed expenses like rent, car payments, you most likely are not going to be able to adjust those. So when you're having to adjust, where can you be flexible? What can you start minimizing first? What's realistic for you? So next steps, where do we go from here? Like I said, find a system that works for you when it comes to budgeting. It's not a one size fits all. There are a lot of different methods. So find one that works for you, and that might take a little trial and error. Make sure you review your income. Do you understand kind of what your monthly income is? And do you also know your fixed and variable expenses? So have you identified and categorized those expenses? Are you saving for emergencies? If you haven't, maybe this is the time to start doing so. Are you also balancing your budget regularly and adjusting and maintaining your budget as you go through? So like I said, this is flexible. This is something that is constantly in motion, but find a system that works for you that you'll be able to maintain and meets the goals that you might have set for yourself. So thank you so much for joining me today. We do offer other, like I said, financial literacy series programs. They'll be available on our website. But Basic Needs Services is also located in McCarthy Hall 143. We're open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and our email is on the screen. If you have any questions or would like to stop by, we're happy to help in any way that we can. So thank you again so much for joining us today in the Let's Get Financially Fit workshop.